I had been single for a while and I was sick and tired of it. Being 32 and single is no laughing matter. The traumatic experiences of watching your friends get married, have children, and attain the American dream are akin to the hopeless depression of the schizophrenic mental patient. I wanted a wife. I wanted kids. I wanted a steady job. I was tired of working at Burger King and living alone in a studio apartment, and I was almost certain I memorized 90% of porn stars on the internet by name. Disgusted by the company of my left hand, I decided to go out to one of those speed dating events. I picked out my best garb and walked out the door. Keep in mind, I worked at Burger King, so the best clothes I could afford were some mediocre dress shirts and tattered khaki pants I bought at Walmart during a clearance event. I walked into the event, trying to display the shred of confidence I had left. I was instantly discouraged when I saw all the other competing males in their Armani suits. High-class whiskey in hand, and auras reeking of nothing but pure self-esteem and conceit. The ladies there were dressed in fine dresses, some of them quite low-cut, and smelled like a flower garden designed by Martha Stewart herself. These were some serious lookers in there, and I swear, my pants shrunk a couple sizes at the sight of some of those dresses. The speed dating started. The first girl I sat down with was quite young, a 22-year-old mother of 3. She had made a lot of mistakes in her life and seemed far more than I could handle. Right off the bat, she told me about how she was 4 days sober from methamphetamine and was looking to settle down with a nice man who didn't look like a walrus. I spent the next 4 minutes making general small talk, quite literally fearing for my life. Once that buzzer sounded, I rocketed out of my chair with the speed of a gazelle. The young woman seemed offended, but honestly, what did she expect? The next woman was way too old for me. I had thought that these events were age regulated and had different meetings for people in different stages of life. I'm no pervert, but the whole idea of taking her shirt off and seeing 2 runny eggs nailed to the wall did not appease me. My decision was finalized as soon as she brought up her grandkids. I can hardly handle 1 generation of young ones, much less 2. I actually asked her if she needed help getting out of her chair after the buzzer sounded. Again, another dark look. I was batting 0 for 2, but such pitches were ones that I would gladly let the catcher have. The next woman seemed much more appealing. She was 26 and studying to be a nurse at a local hospital. She loved kids, but had none of her own, which was a relief to me. She seemed well kept and stable, and wasn't a bad looker either. No lie, my eyes did wander a bit south a couple times during the meeting. She either didn't notice or didn't care, as she never pointed it out. I asked her if she'd like my number as the session ended, and she consented. I flipped open my phone and entered her number as she read it out, smiling at her and thanking her for her listening ear. No wonder I had been single for so long. I got up to the next table. While doing so, I closed my phone by accident and realized that I never saved her number, so it was lost forever. For the love of 0 for 3. The next table was empty. What a joke. If I wanted to sit there and stare at a wall, I would have stayed home. Nothing really to say here. Moving on. This is where the story begins getting dark. The woman I met at the next table was the most interesting of all, but not in a bad way. She had long flowing dark hair and green eyes. She had this cute smile, and man, what a tight body on this one. Black dress, black shoes, black everything. For someone dressed in such a gothic manner, she had such a bubbly personality. Everything I said made her giggle, and I felt like a king just talking to this girl. She was 27 and currently unemployed. She was married to a husband before, but he had left her after their 2 children died of leukemia. She told me that the cancer was entwined with her lineage, dating back as far as the 18th century. Therefore, in numerous fits of emotional rage, her ex-husband blamed her for giving the children cancer and left. Too pained by the loss of her entire family, she moved to the city a few weeks ago and was living on unemployment, unable to continue working at her job due to the crippling depression and panic she suffered as a result of her abandonment. Despite the torment in her life, she never seemed depressed about it. Either she was incredibly optimistic about life, or she was one of the best actors I had ever seen. Either way, I was willing to take a shot. I asked her if she'd like my number. It turned out that she had some bad meetings at this particular convention herself and wanted to take off to do something more fun. She tossed me an invite, and seeing as I was a lonely 32-year-old man, she didn't have to ask twice. I never understood what she saw in me over all the other guys. I was beaten and broken with no aspirations to better my current situation. Maybe she understood how I felt, considering all the pain she felt herself, and decided to get to know who I really was under this cocoon of emotionless insecurity. I sensed the thread of compassion intertwined between all that stress and trauma, willing to lend an ear to anyone that felt the same pain as her. I was truly transfixed by her presence, drawn to her character. I had never felt like this before. We decided to go to a pool hall. Apparently, she used to be a regular at another pool hall by her old house, winning local tournaments and making a name for herself, and she wanted to check out the scenery here. I wasn't too shabby at the table game myself, so I was excited. Every shot she made was perfect. The balls just sank into the pockets like each pocket was a black hole just waiting for something to trespass into its field. Out of the 17 games we played, I think I made around 23 shots. She just kept running the table. It was funny because she kept apologizing for being so good. I waved the apology and complimented her on her skill, causing her to giggle more. Every time she laughed, I fell harder and harder. And to be honest, I was always excited when the cue ball landed on my side of the table. You know, because she bent over to take her shots, as many pros do. We left after that. She said she had to get home as she had some errands to run, being new in the neighborhood and all. I agreed, since I had a Facebook application that I had to update. Obviously, I didn't give her that reason. Jesus, what the hell is wrong with me? Passing up an amazing girl for Facebook? Ugh. So we exchanged numbers and parted ways. I couldn't believe it. I had actually scored a beautiful woman. Hell yeah. Weeks and months passed on. We continued to talk and eventually began regularly dating. The relationship moved pretty quickly and it seemed we were truly matched for each other. After about 7 months of dating, I asked her to marry me. I popped the question on the 17th as that's how many games we played on our first date. She found that so romantic and flew into my arms, screaming yes to the skies. Things were finally looking up. I moved out of my shitbox apartment and into her home. I always admired the cozy feel of her 2-bedroom ranch house. Something perfect to start a family in. As I was moving my final things in, I noticed how much of a mess I was making, with my boxes and stuff and all. I apologized and motioned to the basement to finish moving my things. Her face instantly darted to mine. In a hurried and almost frantic voice, she assured me that she'd take care of the rest of my things and that I should relax. It was a bit odd, sure, but she had been through so much excruciating sadness throughout her life that her having a psychiatric illness is something I expected. I complied with her request. The next few months were great. We never got tired of each other. And on our wedding day, the kiss we shared on that altar was so special that I firmly believe angels surrounded us and serenaded us with harps and trumpets as our lips connected and sparked so brightly that the entire room was illuminated. I'll leave out the details of the honeymoon as this is not a pornographic piece. She was always leery of me approaching the foreboding basement, sometimes to the point of arguing with me about it. But aside from that, I didn't see any fault in her, until everything I knew about life was shattered. One day, she told me she was going to the grocery store. I noted that I wanted some ground beef in order to make hamburgers for dinner. She smiled at me with that cute, adorable smile I had grown to know and love and headed out. After climbing Burger King's corporate ladder, I had finally attained the position of regional financial manager for the entire state. I was working on some budget information, assessing the costs of all the franchises across the state. It was a long and arduous process, but I was getting just above 6 figures for it, so I wasn't complaining. After each report was fully completed and evaluated, I moved the files to a USB drive so I could upload them to a computer for corporate meeting the next day. To my horror, with only 3 reports left to finish, the computer crashed. If I didn't finish these reports, I would surely lose my job. I called my wife, asking her if she had another computer or something I could use, but she didn't answer. I rummaged through the house to find something to finish these reports with, to no avail. Desperate times called for desperate measures, so I took the daring risk of approaching the basement. The handle was unusually cold and the door was locked. Frustrated and defeated, I slumped to the couch in a depression. That is, until I realized that there was a specific flower pot that my wife always guarded with her life. On a hunch, I went to it and found the key at the bottom of the pot, under the dirt. As soon as I opened the door, a rancid and tangible odor attacked me like a falling wall from a decrepit building. The entire basement looked as if it was wasting away, a clear contrast to the rest of the house. The heavy layers of dust upon every surface suggested that the basement hadn't been accessed in years. Using my cell phone as a flashlight, I guided myself down the stairs and flicked a light switch. Surprisingly, the bulb still worked. The walls looked molded, the wood was breaking down, the stench was putrid, and the entire place was in disarray. I encountered a strong sense of dysphoria after setting foot in the room, so I quickly searched for some old computer with the intent of running upstairs as quickly as possible. To my luck and astonishment, there was an old laptop and charger in the corner, hidden under some boxes and books. Oddly enough, one of the boxes was one which she had brought down after I had first moved in. I had not seen some of this stuff in a long time. Ignoring the nostalgia, I seized the computer and charger and raced up to the master bedroom. After giving the laptop a few minutes of power, I booted it up. It ran on Windows XP and was quite the technological dinosaur compared to modern equipment, but it had Microsoft Office, so it was acceptable. As soon as Windows finished booting up, a system message appeared on the screen notifying me that new sources had been added to the tag video cache, and if I'd like to check it. I had never seen a system message like this before. I know that snooping is generally taboo, but curiosity overcame me. I was taken to a hidden file that required a password to access it. Rolling my eyes, I moved my cursor to the X out of the program when suddenly, something typed the password in for me. A bit frightened at this point, I was sucked into the screen. There were 4 videos, entitled him.avi, 1.avi, 2.avi, and y.avi. All 4 thumbnails were pure black. Curious, I clicked on the file entitled him.avi. I should have never done that. The video was extremely shaky and grainy. I could barely make out the figure of a man tied to a chair with some sort of metallic rope. A woman moving as if she was floating on air, not moving a single bone in her body, but yet being able to slowly hover around the room, came into the picture. To my horror, she brought out a knife and started slowly cutting the man. The man screamed in brutal pain as the woman slowly cut him into pieces. Blood poured from his mouth and all his lacerations as the woman dug the knife in deeper. His clothing was slowly stripped from his body, and after each article was removed, she used a lighter to set off all the newly exposed hairs on fire. Covered in horrific burns and terrifying cuts, the man had stopped screaming and was now simply bawling. He occasionally screamed out, "Why?" For that was all he could muster. Each time he did, the woman stabbed him again. She began laughing as the woman began vomiting blood and entrails. She picked up the small solid pieces of the vomit with the knife and slowly licked the knife clean, giggling like a schoolgirl. She then proceeded to gouge the man's left eye out while he was still alive. I couldn't watch anymore, so I closed the video. Shaken and horrified, I clicked on 1.avi. I had to know what was going on. This time it was a young boy, about 8 years old, bound into the chair. He looked confused and innocent. I shook my head and fell into tears. Such a thing was not about to befall this boy. The video was of the same quality as the last one. However, the background was much brighter. They seemed to be in an abandoned household, falling apart and in ruin. The woman floated over to the boy, much like she did in the last video, and kissed him gently on the cheek. She slowly brought heat lamps, the source of brightness mentioned before, over to the boy, one by one, until the entire video was white. After a while, the camera was dim so that the boy could be seen again. The innocent look once seen in the beginning of the video turned into one of excruciating pain. The heat lamp slowly began burning his clothes and skin. Bubbles and blisters began rapidly forming on his skin as he too screamed in pain. As the man in the last video, he screamed, "Why?" and was punished each time by being brutally lashed with a belt studded with pieces of what appeared to be broken glass. The blisters began to boil as the child was roasted alive. Eventually, the screaming stopped and the boy fell into seizures. At this point, the same giggling in the last video could be heard again, this time even louder. She then took a knife and carved "I deserve this" into the child's melting torso as he screamed. Eventually, the boy stopped moving. I closed out at this point. I needed to see the next one. I had to witness this. This had to be stopped. With such a determination, I clicked on 2.avi. This time, there was no one strapped into the chair. Instead, an infant car seat was in the chair with what seemed to be a newborn infant tightly strapped inside. Like the previous videos, a woman floated over to the child. She rubbed its head and briefly went off camera. She came back with a syringe and violently stuck it into the child's body, injecting a blue liquid into the child. Unique to the collection, the video began fast forwarding. At first, the infant seemed normal, happy, smiling, and carefree. As the fast forwarding progressed, the child grew more and more uncomfortable. It started coughing and wheezing. It began puking up a white liquid and began crying, almost as if it too was saying, "Why?" A dark bottle was briefly placed in front of the camera, and the words "tasty juice" were written upon it. The bottle was turned over to reveal its contents. A blue liquid that sizzled when it reached the ground. Blood-curdling screams erupted from the baby as it fell into more of an unstable condition. As the shrieking child grew closer to death, the same giggling in the previous videos presented itself, but this time, it was far louder than before. Determined to make it to the end, I fixated my eyes upon the screen despite how much they were tugging at me to look away. The woman was screaming in laughter louder than the baby was at this point. She floated over to the child again, unstrapped it, grabbed it by the legs, and to my utter shock, swung it head first as hard as she could at the wall. The child's head exploded upon impact, leaving cranial viscera and fluids draped all over the wall. The video then went black. Shaking, I forced myself to click on y.avi. Before the video played, I noticed that this file was modified within the last hour. Almost blinded by fear, I swallowed my apprehension and opened my eyes. This time, there was just the woman. No other person was present. She was facing away from the camera and was speaking in a demonic tone. I can't recall exactly, but here's a paraphrased transcript of what she said.
"Hello. Clearly by now, you know that I'm not the person you thought I was. I'm a sick and twisted woman. I love this. It makes me so happy to see somebody die, especially at my hands. I know you're watching this, and I know you're terrified. The ghosts of those that I have killed are swarming around you right now, telling you to pull away from the screen, to save yourself. And yet you still sit there and watch, waiting for some happy ending, or some reasonable explanation as to the events that you've just witnessed. There are no special effects here. What you saw was real. I love watching this footage, even so much as to pleasure myself to it, but I had to hide it. You couldn't know. Your lonely piece of shit brain would tell you to turn me in. You were so desperate for love that you fell in love with a serial killer."
The woman turned around instantly and I recognized the face of my wife. I couldn't even feel emotion at this point. I didn't know what to think. My memory had fallen to pieces. I didn't know where I was or who I had been, or what I was about to go through. Everything in my life died as I saw the once happy and bubbly eyes that I once saw in my wife become vapid and emotionless. A smile crept across her face, one that makes me quiver in a malaise upon the slightest thought of it. This wasn't possession. This wasn't mental illness. This was just evil. So evil. The video continued.
"It's quite a shame. I really loved you. We had this passion. Remember the giggle? I made you fall in love with me. I tricked you. I lied to you. And want to know the best part? I knew you would find out. I couldn't keep the secret forever. Eventually, you'd find the key to the basement. Eventually, the stench would become too strong. Eventually, the decaying foundation would begin the top of the house. And eventually, you'll realize that my children never had leukemia, and my husband never left. I killed them. And they're closer than you think. Why do you think the basement smells so bad? You'd be surprised how easy it is to cement human remains onto the floor. You stepped on my dead children and husband. Do you feel proud of yourself? I know you're watching this video. I just made this video. I know what you've done.
I began shaking my head, fearing what I knew I was about to hear. A cold sweat crept upon me as I suddenly felt 2 eyes bore into the back of my head. I was paralyzed.
Those noises you're hearing aren't the pipes. Turn around.
I slowly turned and froze as I met the psychotic eyes of my wife. She began to giggle. I don't know what happened after that. I've been told by police that people heard screams coming from my house during my attempted murder and called the police. I was told by physicians that I was violated with the sharp end of a screwdriver and that she placed a block of hot ice on my lap. I was tied to a chair, the same one that was used in previous videos, and was videotaped. All the videos are now in police custody, and I refuse to see mine. My wife was given the death penalty. I was present at the execution. Her last words were to tell me that she would never leave me, that she would always know where I was, that she would never give up on my murder, and that she never left a job unfinished. She was sure to tell me that I would see her again, that she sent another minion to finish the job. She finished by telling me that I would never be safe. Ever. She survived the first 3 attempts at a lethal injection, but died on the 4th. She was smiling, and she giggled like a little schoolgirl right before she died. I had been through extensive therapy, and years later I have been able to overcome the horrific trauma I saw and experienced. I still make 6 figures a year. I have made a good network of friends, and my life has been incredible. I feel accomplished and successful, something I had never felt before. I am now confident, so confident, in fact, that I am going on a date tonight with a girl. She's cute too, with this long, dark, flowing hair and vibrant green eyes. Alright, it's time for a review and analysis. I just need a minute to process what the fuck I've been reading this whole time. I'm gonna let you guys know this right now. I nearly broke down in shock, awe, and horror while reading this story, and I'm like, I just don't know what to say. I'm absolutely bewildered. And it's like, I'm getting the distinct impression that the author thought it was a good idea to milk an infant's death for shock value and horror, which honestly is the most wretched, manipulative, evil thing you could have ever done with writing a story. I mean, like, honestly, this just makes me frustrated and angry for myriad reasons. Because if I was an author and I was writing a story, I wouldn't even dream about writing a story in which there's featuring an infant's death for shock value and clout. Like, what the fuck am I reading? Like, honest to God, what the fuck am I reading? Not to mention, I've been warned beforehand that the author who wrote this story has been receiving numerous death threats, and honestly, I don't blame them. I don't blame the people one bit for sending the author death threats, because if anything, in my opinion, I think it's 100% justified, because why the fuck would you even write something of such grotesque and disgusting nature? Why would you write something like this? I mean, like, I was really tempted to throw out some death threats and racial slurs at the author myself, but I'm just gonna, like, not do that, because I feel like at this point it's just a mature thing to do whenever I'm doing a reading and analysis of this story. After all, I'm trying to provide a new format here on Diamond Reads Reloaded. So all I can say is, yeah. The protagonist, if you can even call him that, is extremely unlikable here. The wife is just a fucking horror show in every sense of the goddamn word, and I'm actually glad that she got executed in the end, so good fucking riddance to her. She will not be missed at all. So, yeah. The victims in this story did nothing wrong. They get an easy pass here. They are, like, not the asshole here. But we got a 3-for-1 deal here. The author, the protagonist, and the wife are full-on assholes. And I recently found this story on the Creepypasta wiki, and in the comments section of this story, an anonymous user wrote a comment, and it says, and I quote, "Why is this still on the wiki? How on God's green earth did this get pasta of the month? This isn't even a story. It's the opposite of a story. What you're looking at when you view this page is the antithesis of a narrative. It's the antithesis of thought. Just cut out the gore and the nonsensical infanticide and the screwdriver rape and see what you have left. Nothing is the answer. There's no structure here. No substance. It's just a whiny 30-year-old man-child with the personality of someone who unironically browses incel message boards doing practically nothing. There's just nothing scary here. Nothing creepy. No build-up, no tension, nothing. It's just this unlikable creep wandering around doing unlikable creepy things. Then there's the gore, which I guess is supposed to be shocking, but only ends up making me worried that someone who actually sat down and took time out of his day to write paragraphs long scenes about this graphic torture of a newborn child is apparently not in a mental institution somewhere. The quote-unquote protagonist, if we can even call him that, is unlikable, boring, and whiny. The villain is practically a non-entity in the story itself. The victims have even less of a presence. Seriously. I mean, the man and the kid are at least so obviously non-existent that the author decided to just insert an extra scene with the baby because otherwise the reader wouldn't care. You could literally replace the torture with a scene where the wife mutilates a potted plant or a desk lamp, and it would have the same impact. The only reason anyone would feel any emotion here is the baby. And it's not fear or disgust or whatever the hell the author wants his readers to feel. It's a bit of outrage that someone actually wrote this, and a deep concern for his mental state and the state of the mental health care system. Christ alive. I have no idea what in Tartarus possessed the author to not only write this, but to post it online as well. And I have even less of an idea regarding the drugs that the staff on this wiki happened to be taking when this god-awful anti-story was approved for Pasta of the Month. Gods above and below, I'm ranting. I'm sorry, but there's no way on earth I can write an actual coherent review about this. My final thoughts are, this story needs to go. It needs to go straight to hell. But before it goes, the author should reread it. If he still likes what he wrote, he should get himself checked in at the nearest mental institution. I agree with this wholeheartedly. Cause I myself want to know what ungodly force compelled the author to think that writing this story was a good idea, because honestly, it really fucking wasn't. So yeah. The author, the protagonist, and the villain, it's a 3-for-1 deal here. All three of them are complete fucking assholes in this story. And to the author, fuck you to the fullest extent for writing this pathetic excuse for a story. Like, never in my life would I ever dream of having to read or write a story about an infant's death, to which this story is a primary example of. Fuck this story. I am giving it a solid 0 out of 10. This merits no positive score whatsoever. And my final note to the author, please do me a favor here. Go to your local therapist and show them this story you wrote. Because I want to see whether or not this will land you in a mental institution or not. Because if not, then there is seriously something fucked up with the American mental health care system. And that's all I have to say. That was the first ever episode of Diamond Reads Reloaded, and I did not enjoy this story at all, so I'm just not going to end it on a positive note. So yeah, fuck this story and fuck anyone who actually enjoyed it. I want to give a special shout out to my great friend Shadowblazer for agreeing to do a collab with me on the pilot episode of Diamond Reads Reloaded for this story. It fills my heart with joy to know that I am actually able to complete this episode and present it to the public eye for their entertainment pleasure. But yeah, that's all I can say. And that's going to conclude today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Like this video and subscribe and turn on notifications because I post new content almost every single day. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. Stay blessed. And of course, well, I don't know what else to say here. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to go throw some fucking holy water at myself. Jesus.